Good afternoon and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. I'm Drew Clark, editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. Super happy to welcome you to our discussion today on digital skills training. But before I introduce our panel and our topic, I want to give a quick snapshot of upcoming broadband. We've been the month of April. We had a number of great events with a number of partners, including Public Knowledge, Next Century Cities, the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, I guess I should say, NCTA, Internet and Television Association. And we are really excited today to be working with another partner network on this event here. But our upcoming Wednesday Broadband Breakfast Live Online, which you can find across the top of Broadband Breakfast. Just click on Broadband Live. You can see all of our upcoming events. And we've been doing a series of events on smart cities. We talked about smart cities and education on the first, smart cities and multi-dwelling units or bulk billing, smart cities and transportation. We're going to be coming back to smart cities next week, smart cities and healthcare. And then a few weeks after that, smart cities and digital inclusion. And we'll also be talking about spectrum. So really excited about that topic, that framing and framework for understanding more about all aspects of connectivity with smart cities. We are very, very excited to be in 2 weeks' time doing an event in California. It is our first regional BEAD event, if you will. It's the California Broadband Summit at the Cal Matters Ideas Festival. We're partnering with Cal Matters, the nonprofit newsroom based in Sacramento, but that covers the state. And we are just very, very pleased with the partnership, because with Cal Matters, they cover everything. They cover like healthcare and the budget and homelessness and all aspects of policy in the state, the biggest state in the country, of course. And so the Cal Matters Ideas Festival will be covering a range of topics on the 5th and 6th. And we're putting on a program, the California Broadband Summit, on June 5th from 10:30 Pacific time to around 4 o'clock Pacific time. And a live stream will be made available at some point soon. But for those of you who are in California or want to get to California, you really shouldn't miss the California Broadband Summit on Wednesday, June 5th, and participate in the Cal Matters Ideas Festival. It's $199 to participate both days. One ticket gets you to both programs. Same thing. You buy the Cal Matters Ideas Festival and come to the California Broadband Summit. And we're just, again, really excited. The event will be sponsored by AT&T, by Tirana Wireless, by Cal Broadband, the California Broadband and Video Association, and by CETF, the California Emerging Technology Fund. Very excited to have each of these organizations as sponsors of this program. And again, you won't want to miss it. Just 2 more weeks until then. And the other sort of upcoming event I wanted to just share is that 2 weeks' time, because we're going to be out in Sacramento, we're just going to do an extremely brief 12 noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time, just like a preview. It'll be like a sneak peek inside the hall that we'll be at. So just set your clock for that. And then 2 weeks following, we're going to be partnering with MMTC on the Juneteenth event that they are putting on about digital equity and the Black church. And we're just very, very excited for that partnership too. So that's kind of the upcoming agenda. And I want to again thank the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast, because this free programming that we do is part of what you can get for free for being a member at Broadband Breakfast. We also encourage you to join our premium product, the Broadband Breakfast Club, for just $99 a month or $590 a year. With that, you get access to everything. You're limited to 13 articles a month with the free plan, but all of our articles, plus the premium articles, the reports we do twice a month, and all the video from event, that's available to our Broadband Breakfast Club members. But because of the support of our sponsors, we are able to do this free event every week. Our Broadband Breakfast sponsors include Utopia, SmartWave, Ookla, Wesco, Coup Systems, the Institute for Local Self-Reliances, Community Broadband Networks Initiative, broadbandtoolkit.com, Google Fiber or G Fiber, Broadband Now, NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, WISPA, AT&T, Tirana, Cal Broadband I've mentioned. And for this event today, super happy to have the support of Comcast and of Network On. So with that, let me go ahead and open up our view for each of our panelists right here. I'm going to introduce them briefly and then give each of them up to 5 minutes to talk a little bit about our topic today. And our topic today is digital skills training. I guess that can sound generic, but in this era of technological leaps and bounds of broadband that's improving, better broadband, better lives, as we say. So as we get higher capacity broadband, how do we use it? How do we take advantage of it? How can organizations and educational institutions design curricula that keep pace with technological advancements? And what can other employers and nonprofits and digital navigators, great fun to work with Network On 6 months ago on the Connect 20 Summit, which was focused on digital navigators and the role that they play in bridging this gap. So the speakers we have today are really going to open our eyes to these issues. We'll kick it off with Matthew Summey, who's vice president. I got to know Matt, Officer 1.0, right? I mean, like before the current wave of interest, there was a state broadband program, and I had the privilege of working in the land of Lincoln, and I got to know Matt, and it's great to see you again after these very few short years. So Matt, as this vice president, in this role for strategic planning and impact, he develops and drives strategy and measurement for the company's community investment portfolio and corporate social responsibility, including digital equity, economic mobility, and civic engagement. So we're going to look forward to hearing what Matt has to say after I introduce the others. He'll be followed by Jaron Culina, who began with the National Skills Coalition in 2021 as the manager of Business Leaders United. I look forward to learning about, the role of National Skills Coalition, who it is, what role they play in this space. And National Skills Coalition and BLU help leaders in small and medium-sized enterprises and are concerned about our country's digital mismatch between public investments in skills and education. So how do we prepare for the jobs of the 21st and continuing century? So that's what we're going to hear from Jaron on. We're also really blessed to have Daisy Magnus Ariete. I hope I got that right. I'll just call you Daisy. That's easy enough. Daisy is the co-founder and co-executive director of Code the Dream, and she wrote her first line of code in a Code the Dream class, and within a year was working as a full-time software engineer at Duke University. So Daisy, we're looking forward to hearing from you about Code the Dream and the role that Code the Dream and the role that other organizations play in this space. And then batting cleanup, we're really the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Lo is Senior Programs Manager at NDIA, and Lo has worked in libraries in the greater Baltimore area. That work has led Lo to the field of digital equity as they experience the impacts of the digital divide in their own community. And prior to joining NDIA, Lo served as the coordinator of digital equity at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. So again, looking forward to your experiences, each of you, and let's turn the time over to you, Matt, to give us your thoughts on our topic here today.
Sounds great. Thanks, Drew, and great to see you. And thanks for all the work that you're doing in this space. Incredibly important to give us all a chance. And to my colleagues, Daisy, Lo, and Jaron, a lot of great friends here doing great work. So I think we're going to have a good, robust discussion today. So we're here to talk about the digital skills divide, and we'll talk through what exactly that means. But let's think about this at a very fundamental level, because the foundational skills are all about what leads to economic mobility. So if you don't have the ability or don't have the comfort to get connected to your SSID in a wireless network, if you are not able to get online to set up an email account, the opportunities that you miss out on are significant. And in this moment, not just of technological change, but intense investment from the federal government now flowing to states through BEAD, through the Digital Equity Act, through CHIPS, and so many other places, workforce is front and center in those conversations. So just last week, we're in Washington for the National Skills Summit, National Skills Coalition Skills Summit. And we had the opportunity to preview some research that they have finished. We've had the honor of working with National Skills Coalition for a couple of years now, but also then taking the work with NSC, turning around and working with Lo and her colleagues and others to bring this to life in very effective forms through digital navigators to connect individuals to these opportunities. So I want to throw out some stats to help frame the conversation today, and then we'll dive right into it. But let's start first with even one digital skill can increase earning potential by 23%. So that's the economic imperative that we're all talking about today as we work this through. But just recently, NSC worked with Impact Research and did some public opinion polling, and the results of that are very telling. So as we think about this audience of practitioners, of policymakers, what we can do to frame this discussion, because if we don't succeed with these federal infrastructure investments, which means that there's job opportunities for all, we're going to miss this opportunity to do the things that we all want to do for this country, because infrastructure leads to opportunity. But if you don't have the skills to participate in that, then that will only exacerbate the skills divide that we're talking about today. So a handful of those stats, as I mentioned. The first, nearly 3/4 of those polled believe that expanding skills training is an important way to improve the economy. I think that feels like table stakes and something we intuitively all know, but important in this polling is that it cut across perspectives, geography, political parties. This is something that everybody thinks is important and therefore sees the opportunity ahead. 9 out of 10 respondents believe that increased access to digital skills is important throughout their career. So think about every single day we all improve in what we do. We've got to make sure that is an ethic that carries through all work. Nearly 3/4 of nearly 96% believe that the opportunity to train in advanced skills is essential in every day. So it is getting up, improving, getting access to what those training programs look like, all incredibly important stuff. And let me end with just one last stat, and then I'll turn it over to Jaron. As we look across this, this is all ultimately about investment. There's significant funding out there, and I was very struck by a comment that Secretary Raimondo made last week. She talked about Texas and how there are 800,000 people or 800,000 open jobs and only about 500,000 people pursuing those jobs. So the economic opportunity is out there, but if we don't put the investment forth to support these infrastructure packages in a way that leads to tangible results, we again will not only exacerbate that digital skills divide, we're going to fall short on these historic investments and helping them to achieve the things, again, that we all want. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jaron, and we'll come back to questions later.
Awesome. Go ahead, Jaron.
Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate the partnership that we have with Comcast to do all of the work that we do, and glad to be joined with Daisy and Lo on this conversation. So happy to be here today. National Skills Coalition is a DC policy and advocacy organization working on both state and federal workforce policy. And our real goal is to fight for inclusive, high quality skills training so that people have access to a better life and local businesses see sustained growth. And a lot of that work is done through collaboration with networks on the ground, including community colleges, business labor, training providers, business serving entities, and community-based organizations. And just to kind of build off some of the context that Matt was talking about, when we worked with Comcast and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta to showcase some of this digital skill need. I can answer the question that's in the Q&A right now through putting in that resource of the stat that Matt shared. But also one of the other things I think that we learned in that data was that, and this is real-time data, because a lot of the data that we were seeing before is projected data on labor market needs. And this is real-time labor market data because we looked at job postings from millions of jobs across the country. And we really saw that 92% of jobs required digital skills. And if you look at the report, you'll see what is a definitely digital, what is a likely digital, and what are no digital skills, something like what we consider childcare or rearing or daycare. But although I can imagine that nowadays we can even be using technology in those types of jobs. So most of the jobs that we see are going to use technology, and we've seen advancing technology across the board since the pandemic, but even before the pandemic too. But what we also know is a third of workers don't have the foundational digital skills necessary to enter into the workforce. And that's a problem for employers that are on this call right now, but it just should be an interest of you to be thinking about how do you build the foundational digital skills that then get you into the door, and then you build upon that to get those industry specific skills too. And that is a range across entry-level workers and mid-level workers. So it's not to say that only entry-level workers are the people that need these digital skills. This is across the board. A lot of jobs require digital skills. So the one thing I always say, because I work on the business side of this, is there is an ROI in this for businesses to be thinking about too. So if you are not thinking about providing digital skills, whether that's like upskilling or reskilling your workers into the advancing technology, that could be in new broadband technology, but that could be in manufacturing facilities when you have a new CNC machine that you have to be able to get your workers upskilled into. The cost of not providing those digital skills is whatever turnover cost could be. That could be anywhere from $25,000 to $78,000. And that's a significant amount of money for employers to be thinking about if they're not upskilling their workers, because many people are going to be leaving if they don't have those right skills to get into that new jobs and the new skill set. So that's kind of why we are really into this conversation, and we're looking at it as that federal investment piece of how states are really working to implement their BEAD and DEA funding, and seeing if there's any state policies that could really be enacted to help embed those digital skills in already existing workforce structures, because we know we have really good things happening in states, and if they're not already thinking of digital skills being embedded in that curriculum, then they're missing out on people that really could benefit from having the foundational skills built into these workforce programs. So thanks again for being here, and I can't wait to see what other questions people have in this topic.
Awesome. Thank you again. That's extremely useful, setting the table. Let's open it up to Daisy and tell us more about Code the Dream and your thoughts on this important topic of digital skills.
Thank you so much, Drew. It's a pleasure to be here. At Code the Dream, we believe deeply in digital skills and the idea that digital skills open up economic opportunity. We like to say that we have two North Stars: inclusive opportunity and inclusive innovation. When folks come into our program, they're able to take 9 months of completely free classes in web development. So that's front end and back end engineering. And so we're a little bit more advanced in those initial digital literacy skills of, turning on the computer, creating an email, etc. Folks who come into our program, they learn how to be software engineers in the field, and they learn how to build those digital skills and then land a job that is transformative for not only themselves, but for their families and their communities as well. What's really unique about our organization is that over 60% of our participants are people of color, and over 60% are women. Every year, we have far more applicants than we can take. This year, we are on track to serve about 450 adult learners from around the country. And even then, that's only scratching the surface in terms of the demand. From my vantage point, people are hungry to learn those digital skills. People are aware that in order to take their careers to the next level, and in order to really compete in this new digital environment, that they need those skills. And so at Code the Dream, we're really proud to be an organization, one of few in the country that's really offering that robust and challenging program that's really going to transform people's lives.
Great. Thank you very much. Lo, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this topic and how you kind of came to this issue of the importance of digital skills.
Yeah, so here's the thing about digital skills. It's a spectrum, and it is a massive spectrum. I guarantee every single one of us hosting this webinar, attending this webinar, have digital skills we need to learn. And that's okay. Like, that is totally cool. It is a whole spectrum of digital skills, from the foundational digital skills we were talking about to the coding skills that Daisy is talking about that provide opportunity for the future. And particularly when thinking about digital skills training, we have to also think about what are the skills that folks already have. How do we build off of the skills that folks have accumulated, whether it's through figuring out their smartphone on their own, or working with a community member, or with their nephew, or with their uncle, and honoring not only the work that they have existing within their skill set, so looking at their resources, their techniques, what they're doing, but also then helping them to build that. And that could be really hard to do in a classroom setting. So I work with the Digital Navigators program at NDIA. It's a model that we developed. It's an open source model. So there, I want to say, thousands of digital navigators out in the world working one-on-one with folks to help them build their digital skills, because you have to figure out where folks are and where they want to go. And building that little roadmap can be way more complex than you think, because it's sort of figuring out the patchwork of the skills that they've accumulated on their own and the skills that they need to gain for wherever they want to go, and honoring that some people only want to get so far. Some people's goals are that they do want to learn to code. They want to be a software developer. They have that dream. And other folks just want to be able to send pictures of a bird in their yard to their niece who lives in England. And that was one of my favorite digital navigator success stories, was hearing what it is that people are looking to learn and how they're learning those skills when it comes to working one-on-one through repeat interactions with a community member who's there to support them and lead them down that path. And also knowing that the digital skills spectrum is going to continue to grow and grow and grow as new skills appear. I think a lot of us, as we're pointed out in the chat, there is some AI here. How do we add in some of the pieces around AI as digital skills? And how do we just keep seeing that spectrum grow without being intimidated, and with having responsive programming and assistance that's going to build to that? So at NDIA, we're thinking about all of this. We're working on it. But the good news is we are an organization made up of, I think, almost 1,700 affiliates, all working towards digital inclusion. At this point, worldwide. We tried to be national, but we can't keep out our international friends. So we've got a lot of really good perspective and assistance and folks talking about these topics to help lead us to all of the best practices in digital skills.
Well, let me actually open it to our panel. What reactions do you have to each of your own perspectives on this subject? Again, I think we've sort of laid out a little bit of the fact that there's multiple levels of digital skills, but how do we kind of think about this? What is the kind of maybe appropriate role for given organizations, whether that organization is, you know, an internet service provider or a state broadband office or a nonprofit or a business, you know, an employer? What are some of your thoughts on that, everyone?
I'm really excited about what Lo mentioned, just the broad spectrum of digital skills. And I deeply believe that there's space for all of us on that spectrum. And so, for example, our work is around building technology skills and giving people the skills to become a software engineer. And we partner with many organizations like Lowe's who will give people that initial, taste into technology, will give them just the skills that they need so that they can then start to explore. Perhaps they do want to become web developers. Perhaps they do want to become engineers. And so I see a lot of complementarity and potential for collaboration on this work.
In advance of the Connect 20 Summit that I mentioned earlier, we worked with Network On and NDIA on that. I sat down with Angela Seifer of National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and the question was basically, what are the tools, what are the skills, or maybe what is the ladder? Okay. And she actually had some great points that I just thought would be worth recapping, right? In the days when I was doing the state broadband thing, we tend to talk about a stool, right? Of access and adoption and I can't even remember all the elements. Right? I mean, I'm dating myself, but the way Angela laid it out is, the first ladder on the first step on the ladder is connectivity, affordable connectivity. The second step is, getting a digital device that works, that has kind of a good quality device. The third are digital skills. And this is kind of maybe where we're talking in this space, but there's two more steps on the ladder: tech support, right? Okay. So what is the way people who are not as adept on the internet, how do they get those questions answered? And there are a lot of questions. And for even people who think of themselves as, digitally adept, there are problems in tech support. And actually, ChatGPT has become a bit of my tech support. That's my go-to for a tech support issue these days. And then the fifth is applications, right? Like, how do you get trained on an application? And we may not be talking as much about this, but just your reactions on this ladder. And obviously, I'm going to go to Lo, because Lo has got to say something positive about this, but tell me your thoughts on how we think about this ladder in this context that we're speaking about now of digital skills.
Yeah, so because you perfectly lined up the definition of digital inclusion, I'm going to ask if y'all are familiar with digital inclusion ecosystems. Because you lined me up to talk about a digital inclusion ecosystem, and I think we have a little one right here. So a digital inclusion ecosystem is sort of like everything that comes together to be able to support that definition of digital inclusion. It's all of the programs, the people, the policies, the connections, the relationships that we build that work together. One of the things about things like the full definition of digital inclusion, the connectivity, the appropriate devices, the digital skills, is that we don't have to do it all. We can rely on our partners. We can rely on our communities. We can make sure that we're all supporting the pieces that we are best at, and then continuing to build those partnerships, like Matt said, about how he's working with all of these different folks all over the country to make sure that there is somebody who is an expert and can support that. So that's like a little national digital inclusion ecosystem. But you can see these in as small as neighborhoods, where you might have the community center that offers the digital skills classes. You may have a community internet service provider. I think my neighborhood's a great example. I live in Baltimore. I live in central Baltimore. We've got a community center that provides our digital skills classes. We have a neighborhood internet service provider called Project Waves. And then we also have digital navigators through the Enoch Pratt Free Library, in addition to devices being provided to our region by PCs for People. So there are all these different organizations working together to make sure that the 12 square blocks that I live in are getting all of the support and all of the needs met, as well as our goals met. And most importantly, I think making sure that the dreams are being met of all of our community members.
I'll jump in, Drew. Lo, I think absolutely, had the pleasure of working with Lo, nailed that. But take that 12 blocks and also think about what some of the needs are, but also the opportunities for these individuals. And I think spectrum and ecosystem are exactly the right phrases, because having skills and then knowing where to apply them, and then once you know where to apply them, that hopefully is in an employment setting, having a workforce that the employer helps to support through ongoing training to connect to other opportunities, help you evolve in terms of the pace of technological change. Don't get overwhelmed by what may be coming with AI, because it's already incrementally involved in what you're doing. And if we keep that eye on those outcomes, which this group does so well, that we're always feeding through the digital navigators ecosystem into those places where we've got a skills divide, filling those skills and creating that pathway to economic mobility. That brings us back then to this federal spending of infrastructure without workers. We can't realize the potential and the dream here, and that's the goal.
Can I just add one thing on when we started on this conversation with employers around digital skills, I think it was a little bit confusing to them of what digital skills meant. And to Lo's comment about the spectrum of what that is, it obviously is a spectrum. So we couldn't even just necessarily say like this is what it is. But as we started talking about how technology has been so advancing across the board. It doesn't matter what industry you're in hospitality, you are probably using some type of payment method that includes technology. In construction, you're probably using smart apps and probably several smart apps to be able to get that information to the general contractors. In agriculture, let's even talk about agriculture as I live in a really rural community. Look at what tractors look like nowadays, like all of the computer systems that are in them or the drones that are out there that to be able to check which crops are have disease in them. So I think there's just so many things, and we just have to maybe if you're an employer listening that this does it, you probably have digital skill needs. And the other issue is that maybe you're not necessarily sharing those needs with the education providers or the training providers that are making the program for you. So I would recommend that that's also an important piece of this puzzle, is that everything that you need as far as skills and competencies should also be given to the people that are providing that training for you, like a Daisy or like a community college system, because they could guess, but they're probably not going to be right. So as you are moving so fast in the technology space, just keeping people aware of those digital skills that are necessary to even enter into the industry, and what are you going to like pile on after that to do internal training too.
We've got a number of great questions, so let's kind of just knock through some of these here. Katrina Parker says, for Daisy, where can we sign up for your wonderful training? And is it national or is it local to North Carolina?
It is national, yes. We have students from 40 states around the country right now, and we're aiming to get to 50. And so, yes, people can certainly sign up. We have open applications on our website. We have a two-step application process, so folks can submit their kind of biographical information, and then afterwards we'll give you a chance to test or try out some coding and kind of decide from there if this is a field that you want to jump into. What's really interesting about our program is once people complete the 9 months of free classes, we invite them to apply for a spot in our apprenticeship. So we have an in-house apprenticeship, which we've worked with different employers to make sure that we are teaching those skills that the employers are later going to hire for. But within our apprenticeship, we have over 50 full-time apprentices now, and they are building technologies for marginalized communities around the country. And so really building up their skill set by getting that hands-on experience.
We'll be happy as well to put the links to that in the page for this event, Daisy. And we do have a couple other panelist resources that are already there, including closing the digital skills divide, and also a public perspectives. These are from your organization, Jaron. Do you want to just speak briefly to what those documents do, and maybe just underscore? We did have this question about the 23% one digital skill increases earnings, but could you just speak a little bit about these reports and some data like that, Jaron?
Yeah, I have some very smart coworkers who worked on the research alongside the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta to code that real-time labor market data that I was sharing with you in different categories of definitely digital, likely digital, or no digital skills at all. And the likely digital we kept as that because of things like bookkeeping. So you probably are using a tech platform to be able to do bookkeeping, but there's definitely small businesses around where I live that are still keeping paper ledgers. So just knowing that there are some things that maybe could be coded in different areas. So that closing the digital skills divide report was able to look at all of the digital skills across the labor market and showcase like what are companies actually needing. We do have some state based examples of that too for some of the states that are thinking like, what does it look like in my state versus another state? Although I will say very similar across the board that most jobs are requiring digital skills. And just like I said, it may be just like you didn't know that that's actually a digital skill or a technology skill. And then there's some interesting facts in there about things like people think young kids are very strong at technology because like my 3-year-old knows how to use an iPad probably way better than I know how to use an iPad, but there's a lot of information about like fragmented knowledge. Like, yeah, I'm good at TikTok, but maybe I'm not good at that Excel document that you need for us to do. So there's some interesting facts in there about just like what we were finding in that digital skills information. And then on the public perspective, it's really talking about what are people interested in the investments behind that? Because sometimes you're hearing like, is there really a necessity for us investing in this public workforce system? And you can see that it definitely is. The public is saying that this is an important thing for them to be behind, and workers are saying that this is important for them to have to be able to enter into these new jobs that exist too. So if people want to talk more about their states, what their state looks like, feel free to contact me and I can give you some of that state data too. And
Well,
Matt, I
Jaron, let
don't
me
know if
just
you wanted
also,
to add anything too.
actually, let me ask a question for Jaron and Matt, which is, what interactions are you having, if any, with state broadband offices on these very issues?
Yeah, so after we released the data, my coworker Amanda and then I got to sit on several calls, including with my state Michigan, about with both community-based organizations, but also the state broadband office. One, just because we want advocates to be aware of the issues that are coming down the pipeline, but also the state broadband office. And this may be interesting or this may not be interesting to people, is that like many places, things work in silos. So the state broadband office, and this is not every state broadband office. Some work very well across the board, and we've written about people like Colorado and Florida and Louisiana that have done great work. But the silo departments of broadband office, workforce office, education office maybe don't always allow for the communication to easily happen across the board. So if money is funneling into just the broadband office and it doesn't sit under the labor office, then there maybe isn't a communication about what the workforce needs are across the state. So we're seeing broadband offices look more to their peers across the board, but it's definitely needed more so that as this money funnels into this, and a lot of investment funnels into the states, that they're thinking about what are those digital skill needs, and is there ways to embed that in already existing things that are happening in the state too?
And
Matt, go
would
ahead.
add to that, and I think both Daisy and Lo excellently referenced this, a lot of the public workforce system, people don't interact with it frequently. We'd like to break down those barriers as well. So if you're a small employer and you've got a need for coding skills, it's not a role that you search for often. You need a really good public partner to help you through that process, but you also need organizations like Code the Dream who are helping to fill that funnel and bringing folks into the workspace. So a lot of the research that NSC's done, I think, helps frame this so that when we go to work with these state entities, but also speak as employers, we're putting those pieces together so that small, medium, and large businesses have a role to play, but that navigators can help feed these systems by bringing folks forward that need skills or need upskilling opportunities as well.
Lo and Daisy, anything on the state broadband connections? It's okay if you don't. I just wanted to make sure. Let's keep going to questions. We've got two great ones from Sean McLaughlin. I want to kind of pair them. Sean's analog equity and skills training for media. And this is a great point, Sean, about the role of community media access organizations. And I think that the next part of that question from Sean is that he says that his experience with digital newbies is that cybersecurity and privacy protection are major hurdles. People feel exposed, manipulated, ripped off, and lied to by online platforms and services. How do we deal with people's hesitance to expose themselves and their family to surveillance, commercial and law enforcement, and potential disinformation, scams, and online abuse? Well, this is kind of the elephant in the room question. Thanks for asking it, Sean. I would really love everyone's take on this. How do you kind of guide people through the in many cases, legitimate fears about online abuse.
I'm gonna
Don't
start
ever
this one
take one.
because
Okay, go
I have
ahead,
big
Lo.
thoughts on it.
Great.
One of the things that I've recently heard from a really fantastic digital navigator, his name's Nate Stone out of the Denver Public Library, is that every day most of us are doing some kind of risk assessment in all of our lives. So teaching folks how to translate the skills that they already have when it comes to understanding risk, understanding safety, understanding sort of who and what might be unsafe, transferring all of those skills to the digital sphere and helping them to understand that it's just a transfer of knowledge from one area to another. The same way that if I know everything about where I like to park my car in Baltimore, I know where I like to walk, I know where I like to avoid the crack in the sidewalk because I'll trip. But if I went to another city, if I go to Philadelphia, I don't know any of those things. So it's the same idea of transitioning those skills and those understandings from real life to online and helping people to do those risk assessments for themselves. So they're understanding that there's not a big bad world out there. It's just maybe feels like a new city. It feels like a new place. And the same thing of we want to be trusting and appreciative of others, but the worst thing online is probably another person. And it's the same way that you might not want to hand out your personal information to every person that walks down the street, and teaching them the same thing about the internet, that everyone you encounter online is the same as a stranger you'd run into in the Target parking lot. And just transitioning their own understanding of exactly how they're managing their lives in person to the virtual world can be really helpful. And a shout out to the community media associations too. They were some of the first folks really on the ground in digital equity and inclusion work like 20, 25 years ago. They've been participating in this for a really long time. So I always like to shout them out for being some of the first folks out there. We've always appreciated their work, and they've done really fantastic stuff on misinformation, information literacy, and news literacy in the past. So we're really excited for all the stuff they're going to do in the future.
Wonderful answer. Does anyone want to contribute, or how can others contribute to that?
I can only double stamp what Lo stated. I think Lo is just such a wonderful example of how and why digital navigators are so critical and so just precious in this field, because they approach learning as a way of connecting with people. And so kind of always taking the stance of what do people already know, and then how can we bring them to the next step? And so I think that is just fantastic. Shout out to you, Lo.
I also would add to that, and Lo was absolutely intimating this, the individual nature of those relationships is built on trust and cultural competence as well. And digital navigators that exhibit those cultural competencies in individual communities could be language, it could be race, it could be ethnicity, it could be any number of characteristics. But often it comes down to helping people understand how to ask the question that they're seeking an answer to. And that's often about skills, and navigators absolutely knock that out of the park.
So, Jaren, do you want to add?
I can't do anything better than NDIA.
Okay.
They are definitely the GOAT in this conversation. So
Well, so I do want to also kind of raise the issue about digital skills and workforce training. We started to talk a little bit about this, but I want to come back to this, right? Because I think one of your organizations, I think, used the phrase mismatch, right? Was that was that Daisy's or Jaren? I've forgotten now. Like, is there a mismatch in terms of the skills that people are getting through secondary education, community college, four-year college, and the workforce? And if there is a gap, a mismatch, how can that be bridged?
In our experience, the mismatch comes because technology is moving so quickly. And so often what people learn in their freshman year of college is not applicable by the time that they graduate and they're looking for a job. And that's where an organization like Code the Dream can come in as a nonprofit. We are extremely nimble, and we work very closely with industry to understand what are the skills that they're hiring for, what are the needs of junior developers, so that we can incorporate that training into our program. Additionally, our apprenticeship is set up to be we are a full service dev shop. And so apprentices are getting the same experience as they would at IBM, at Cisco, at SAS. They're using all the same technologies, agile workflows, et cetera. So we can give people that real life experience that helps them transition seamlessly into a full-time employment opportunity. And I think that's something that community colleges, although they're fantastic, and we have some of the best community colleges in the country here in North Carolina, they just aren't set up to work that quickly, and for good reason, right? They provide a lot of stability, but in terms of digital skills, it's good to have a partner like Code the Dream that really can move much quicker than more established and traditional institutions can.
A few years ago, maybe it's more than a few years ago, National Skills Coalition did a study on the skills mismatch, and the evidence was a lot that there was an overabundance of people that had high school degrees and four-year college degrees, but not as many job postings that required those. But this middle skills gap middle skills mismatch is what we were missing. Those things that require certificates, credentials, associate's degrees, apprenticeships, there's more job postings than the number of people that have those things. And so that's causing this skills mismatch. And I mean, to be honest, what we hear from employers often is that students are exiting, much like what Daisy said, students are exiting education programs without the skills that they need to enter into. I think there's the two things that are happening there. One, there just needs to be more federal investments into educational systems to ensure that they can keep up with the pace of what business is moving at. So I'm just going to call it as the policies do need to change to be able to allow for flexibility of community colleges to do other things too, and training providers and workforce boards, all of those entities that provide training, including Daisy's organization. There just needs to be more federal investment. And then there also just needs to be better communication between employers and training providers, whatever the training provider source is, just because employers, I realize you don't have tons of time. You run a business, you have to do other things, but this is just like kind of has to do with your talent pipeline issues too, is that if you want those individuals to have the skills, then you really want to be at the table to have those conversations with those individuals. And I think it can be done in what we call industry sector partnerships, where it's all of industry at the table, having the conversation together to say that we can all agree that the foundational skills that they need are here, and then they should be taught through all of these educational institutions, and you're not repeating yourself to K-12, post-secondary institutions, community-based organizations, that there's a way that those people are all at the table to have that conversation together around that.
What states are doing all this particularly well, Jaren?
It just depends on, some states have better state funding mechanisms to be able to do that. So Ohio has a strong industry sector partnership funding mechanism, largely because the employer associations were pushing that forward for those individuals to be able to have that. I know Ohio State has a strong broadband industry sector partnership right now that they're being able to roll out. My home state, Michigan, funds industry sector partnerships. Pennsylvania. So it just depends on the state mechanism, because there's not really a good federal mechanism. There's a requirement in WIOA, which is what the workforce boards are funded through. But there's no funding investment behind it. So it's really the states that have come up with that mechanisms to bring all those people to the table.
Doreen Corwell asks a great question. These days, people need basic digital skills to get telemedicine, healthcare, bank online, register for zillion activities. Can the speakers comment on ways that people add digital skill development into job descriptions in other sectors? Does anyone want to answer that? I guess maybe to build on that, why is it important for employees to have digital skills, even if a job doesn't necessarily list it as a requirement? Or what are the digital skills you need for life, right? Whether it's in your work or not.
Yeah, Drew, I'll jump in and start this. I think we all are going to have a decent amount to say on the topic, but it kind of comes down to two things on this front, which is I want to come back to that point that Lo was making earlier. There's comfort in this. You know, if you don't feel like you have the skills, you're not going to pursue a role, and employers may not spell out exactly what those characteristics or qualities are. And so if you don't have comfort, you're not going to look at that role and you're not going to know how to interpret the job application or the job description. And so all of us, I think, can do a better job of making sure that we highlight what those are. I think the second part of it, and more importantly, is every role has evolving technical skills. We've all had that moment where a new software package comes and we've got to learn it. It can create anxiety even for the most tech savvy folks, you know, kind of going back to navigators, but also this is a role of employers. You know, ongoing training is something that the NSC work has absolutely highlighted. They'll reference it as upskilling, but upskilling as part of a larger conversation with more emphasis and more funding will go a long way.
Who else wants to talk on that point?
I can share. A recent observation here in Baltimore is specifically, we know that in Baltimore City, we have significantly less folks getting the digital skills that they need. And if you're familiar with the corporation Under Armour, they're based here in Baltimore. So if you ever wonder why everybody is wearing an Orioles Under Armour shirt, that explains it. But specifically, they are looking to recruit a digital adoption lead whose entire job is to be a digital coach. So thinking about ways, if you are a bigger organization, how do you mimic something like a digital navigator internally? A lot of corporations love to use career coaches and sort of corporate leadership coaches. Why aren't there digital skills coaches that are available to you to help not only with the technical side of gaining the digital skills that you need for your work, but also for your personal life, and doing a little bit more of that sort of like emotional component? That is where, I mean, digital navigators can do this out in the world, but if you're looking for it internally within workforce, tailoring it more to that space. We've also seen digital navigators, workforce development staff have been cross-trained as digital navigators, so that as they are providing their standard workforce development support that they do every day, they also can have a little bit better understanding of how to help folks interpret job descriptions, how to talk to them about their own skills, and how to really develop those skills together rather than doing sort of like one-on-one repeat interactions on like, we're going to build on those skills, but more of figuring out how do we identify where you become digitally self-sufficient and expand that a little bit? And how do we see that fitting in with jobs that already exist? And some of those pieces too is acknowledging that telehealth, the skills that you have from taking a telehealth appointment, from being able to bank online, from being able to use TikTok, to sending an email, those are replicable skills that you can use elsewhere. Just because you're not as familiar with Zoom doesn't mean that you're not a good fit for a job that would involve a lot of your time on Zoom. If you're doing telehealth appointments once a week, you're probably really great at all of these sort of one-on-one or group experiences on camera. So translating skills can be really helpful, and just understanding that unfortunately we're speaking different languages when it comes to what's in a job description and what someone thinks they can do.
Rachel Algier asks specifically to Lo, but also to the panel, do you foresee a certification program and or formal curricula for digital navigators in the future? Would there be a benefit to formalizing such a program? Any thoughts on that?
This is like a yes and stuff's already happening. So amazing that you are on board with us, Rachel. I want to highlight some of the digital navigators out of the Colorado Office for Future Work. There is currently a formalization of an apprenticeship program of digital navigators going on out there. We've also seen our digital navigator model is open source. So the idea is that you can expand on it where you need to and really fit it to adapt your community. But there are some core pieces of digital navigation that are sort of set. I know that there has been a lot of talk right now about how do we figure out how to standardize and certify digital navigators. So if you're interested in that and you want to learn more, I would say come talk to me. There's a lot of chatting and discussion going, got anything quite formal, but this is a goal of understanding how a formalized digital navigator sort of credential, certification, acknowledgement would help folks sort of continue their own careers. We've seen digital navigators as a great way for folks to join the digital inclusion world and to upskill themselves. Some of the staff that I've supervised as digital navigators directly at the Enoch Pratt Free Library have gone on to do amazing things. And so that is a specific way throughout the workforce that folks can come into an entry-level digital inclusion position. And maybe they do learn to code. Maybe they discover that digital inclusion policy is their passion, and they are now out here at their state office helping to write the laws that will change the future. Or maybe they're discovering all new pieces of how they want to interact and teach folks, and they're going to be the ones that I'm citing in 2 years, saying there's this fantastic person who has been using this method, and I think we should all try it out. So that's my sort of yes, and check out some of the folks who are doing work on digital navigator credentials too. And I think somebody had a Colorado State policy post in there, but I am also happy to connect you all with folks out there in the world.
I want to make sure we include this question from Isaias Tesfaladet, and then I've got a final question. Isaiah's question is, how can universities, community colleges, and other higher education institutions contribute to digital skills and training needs? And Isaiah's highlights University of Maryland Extension. Daisy or Jaron, do you want to speak to universities, community colleges, and other education institutions there?
Jaren, I'll let you go ahead. I'm still thinking.
Okay. One, used to work for Michigan State Extension, love a good extension program. So then I know already that you are invested in the community and looking ahead of what things are happening in the community because of your extensions commitment. So I think one is just on the worker side of things, just being aware of what worker needs are. I think that's an important, ensuring that community voice is held in that conversation of just being able to see what the people are needing. Because I mentioned this in one of our calls together, is Miami-Dade College has a very interesting idea of looking at AI as a element to all of the programs that they have within their college system. So thinking of like, you are going to use it no matter where. If you're a teacher, you're going to use it. If you're a nurse, you're going to use it. If you're going into agriculture, you're going to use it. So implementing all of those things as like key pieces of the elements of every program. But then also on the other side, they're looking at what the community needs. So let's build up the community's digital skills too by using some of these introduction to AI courses that meet the community exactly where they're at. So both implementing it throughout the college system, but then also looking at it as the community needs too. And then I'll have to go back to the employer side of things. What do the employers actually need to, and looking at that survey of data too.
All right, so I want to get this as a final question. We'll close it out and get everyone's thoughts on it. What does digital skills do for or say about digital equity? What other pieces are we not talking about or haven't yet on this one conversation talked about that we need to make sure we're talking about? And maybe this can tee up our Broadband Breakfast Live online on June 12th. We'll be talking more about digital inclusion in smart cities, but digital equity in particular. And let's just go from the way we began, Matt, Jaron, Daisy, and Lo.
Sure. So, I don't want this to sound glib, but we can't have an equitable future if we don't have skills for everyone. And so let's go back to the notion of being inclusive. That means understanding that we have to meet not only people where they are, but we also have to understand what their individual aspirations are. And that's one-on-one conversation. And that's why I've used phrases like cultural competence, why I think we've all talked so much about navigators. But to have that equitable future, it means that there's a path to economic mobility. And a path to economic mobility cannot be achieved if you don't have digital skills. And there have to be many ways to get those for use in your personal life, in your professional life, or in civic engagement.
Thanks, Matt. Jaron.
I think one thing that maybe is missing in the conversation, largely because I work on more of the employer side of things, is just being aware of the skills that are necessary to enter into the positions that you have. I know that it takes a lot to be able to map out what that looks like, but one, the next generation wants to see career pathways in there to see where they can move up in mobility, but also to the point of everybody was speaking to, I'm not going to apply to a job where I don't think I have the right skills. And so if you really need to put down what are the actual skills that you need and what are you willing to train on, because I think a lot of employers are having some flexibility in what that looks like. So make sure that is in the job description as you're talking about it, and also make sure you're mapping your upskilling processes. Like, are you already doing digital upskilling within internal process? Make sure that is mapped out too, to showcase like what things you can build upon in your upskilling process, like where your digital skills can be moved, and what tech skills they'll be learning throughout that process too.
Great. And thanks so much for being here, Jaren, as well. Daisy.
Drew, earlier you mentioned digital skills as a ladder, and I would love to push back a little bit on that and think of it in terms of, instead of laterally, think of it as a spectrum. As Lo mentioned, people learn different digital skills in order to accomplish things in their own lives, and one is not better than the other. And so we're teaching people to be software engineers, but that does not mean that has to be the end goal for an individual. It could be that they are, learning how to send pictures to their kids. And so again, it's really about meeting people where they are and understanding the problems immediately in their lives that they're trying to solve, and give them the skills in order to do that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for being a part of this discussion and for those great points. Lo.
So digital equity is the condition in which everybody gets to mess around online, have the job they want, the economic impact they want, the entertainment they want. One of the things is digital skills often is a relatively low cost thing you can acquire. Your libraries, your digital navigators, we can access these for free. Home internet is not low cost. And since the loss of ACP, we're seeing that that is a huge economic barrier to our communities. In addition, getting the appropriate device to be able to continue to use those skills you gained at your digital navigator appointment, at your job, maybe in your secondary ed, and being able to practice them and maintain them. If you can't keep up those skills, it is not like riding a bike. That bike got like 5 new wheels and 10 new gears and brakes you didn't know existed. And that can happen so quickly. So the elements of digital inclusion that have to be supported, digital skills are just one part. And if we uplift digital skills, we must continue to uplift the other areas, because until we have the affordable and low cost internet, or ideally free, and until we have the devices in the hands of everyone who needs them, we have a bunch of really smart people walking around with brilliant skills and amazing ideas and nowhere to use them. So making sure that there is a place to use what we learn, not only in the workforce, but also in our lives, is really key to maintaining it, and also to validating the work our folks are doing. If someone trains so hard on all of their digital skills, but can't afford home internet and can't afford a device, or maybe it's not accessible to them based on their location, what's the point of having those digital skills other than just knowing something? So we have to continue to uplift all of the pieces at once, and we can't leave one behind just because one piece is a little bit more exciting or a little bit easier to do.
Well, great last words for this conversation. We'll be back next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time for Broadband Breakfast Live Online on healthcare and smart cities, and 2 weeks from today in California at the California Broadband Summit, the Cal Matters Ideas Festival. On behalf of our guests, Matt, Jaren, Daisy, and Lo, I'm Drew Clark, Broadband Breakfast. We'll see you next week. Take care.